Denizens of the night, welcome to another episode of the macabre, the terrifying. Broadcasting live from an interior closet in a cult's compound, I will be your guide through the witching hours. Tonight, with the help of a gallant detective, we'll unravel a missing persons case that takes a turn for the strange and bizarre. This story is called Gateway to Oblivion by William Makel.
The lad couldn't have been much older than 15, and the tears made him appear even younger. He sat in my client's armchair, almost lost in it, and when he spoke, it was a halting, trembling thing that seemed afraid to make itself heard. "It's my father," he said. "He's fallen in with a bad lot, and it's changing him. Now he's gone walkabout and not been home for a couple of days." I didn't laugh, but the incongruity of it amused me, for I was more used to fathers looking for wayward sons than the other way about. "What is it?" I asked. "Booze? Women? Bookies? It's generally one, two, or all three of those." "Religion," the lad said, spitting it out as if it was a rude word. "Ah, then I can't help you there, son. Getting between a man and his religion is a recipe for murder in this town. You're old enough to ken that." "This isn't a Catholic Protestant thing," he said, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "This is more of a god-devil thing. At least I think that's what it is. But whatever it is he's into, it's right fucking weird. I heard that was your thing, helping folks deal with weird shite." "Generally, I prefer searching for lost husbands, missing cats, and stolen goods," I said, trying to head off where I thought this was going. "Don't talk pish, man," the lad said. "You've got form. Everybody in Glasgow kens that. That's why I'm here." I gave in to the inevitable and heard him out. It didn't take long. The lad, Ian Lang, I found out when he finally told me his name, had it bad. Mother dead a year before. Father turned to the bottle then. When that didn't kill him, fortune tellers, swamis, psychics, and spiritualists. And now, it seemed, something more hardcore. A lot of it was supposition and coincidence. But the lad had an eye for it. He was finding things. Black feathers in a suit pocket, blood under the man's fingernails, and trips to the library that used to bring back westerns now brought heavy leather tomes with titles like The Mysteries of the Worm and The Witch's Sabbath. And he's been going out Wednesdays and Saturdays, staying out most of the night, coming back knackered, and not a smell of drink on him. "And you're sure it's not a woman?" "He still cries in his room when he thinks I can't hear him. Cries for my ma. I don't think it's a woman." "Now here's the hard bit, lad," I said. "What is it you think I can do?" "Finding him would be a start," he said. "Beyond that, telling him to get his arse back home. He's all I've got." Tears were close again, so I spared him the tough questions and got to the easy one. "How much can you afford?" £50, he said. "That'll get you a day's legwork. If you're happy with that, I'll see what I can do." "Just try. That's all I ask," he said, and took 5 crumpled tens from his pocket and smoothed them out on the arm of the chair before handing them over. I put them away with their pals in my wallet. We shook hands on the deal, and I had my first client for a month. The lad was vague on specifics, so I decided to start with a library. When people say the library in this neck of the woods, They usually mean the Mitchell at Charing Cross. So I took the bus down immediately after seeing the boy out and telling him to come back the same time next day. I had a photograph of the man beside the tens in my wallet. It's 5 years old and he's lost a bit more hair since then, but you'll ken him if you see him, the lad had said. I knew I would. I saw the man in the boy's face as well as in the picture. Same hooked nose, sad eyes, and high forehead. When I got to the library, I showed the photo to the lass behind the counter. Aye, I ken him, she said. Sad wee man. Used to read a lot of westerns, then he went doolally when his missus died. He's a nutter? Well, not that bad, I don't think. But he took to getting all these weird books on devil worship and black magic and the like. We had to send to London for some of them, and it was costly, but he paid up without a whisper. And he went awfully quiet these past months. Haven't seen him for a couple of weeks, which reminds me, he's late with some of his returns. I passed her a tenner, and she showed me the list of books he'd been reading. One in particular caught me eye, The Concordances of the Red Serpent. That's a rare one, she said, and we couldn't let him take it away. We got it on loan from the British Library, and it went straight back down to them when he was done. They say it's the only one in existence. I didn't dissuade her on that. I'd seen a copy, even held it a while back. But it went away elsewhere with a lady who'd owned it. And in existence is a fluid concept in some of these kind of cases. I left the library not knowing much more than I had going in, except for one thing. My quarry wasn't the only one reading those books. There was another man doing exactly the same research, and for another tenner, I'd got his address. I headed back to the West End, making for a flat in Oakfield Avenue, just off Great Western Road. This was, still is, student country, and the flat where my own university days started, then crashed, was only 2 doors down from the address I'd been given. But any nostalgia I'd ever had for the place had long since been drank out of me. I didn't even give it a second look as I rang the bell, and was surprised to be let in the downstairs door by a buzzer. My man, Donnie Nolan, was on the second-floor landing waiting for me. He looked me up and down. "Where's the pizza?" he said. "Ah, I see your confusion. No, I don't come bearing sustenance. I'm looking for Davy Lang. His lad's worried." He was a little, wiry man of 60 or so, but when he looked shifty, like now, he looked even older. "I don't ken any Davy Lang," he said, and turned away. "That's funny, because the lass at the library said you were great pals, even reading the same books." He went pale. "Dinna talk about that stuff out here. Anybody could be listening." And with that, he scurried off, but held his door open, waiting for me. I'm not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, so I hurried to catch him and was into his hallway before he thought to change his mind. The tattoo of the stuff that dreams are made of, that usually sits quiet on my forearm, chose that moment to itch and burn. I could read the signs. By rights, I should have turned away then. But I had a client. That buys them some backbone. Although, as I'd already given 20 of the 50 quid away, the lad wasn't going to be buying more than a vertebra or two. Nolan showed me into a cramped, dark room, stacked high everywhere with books, magazines, and newspapers. Thick curtains shut Glasgow out. A 1-bar electric fire struggled to keep the damp at bay, and the place stank of stale beer and smoke. I lit a cigarette to improve the taste in my mouth, while Nolan poured himself a whiskey. He didn't offer me one, but seeing the oily scum on the bottle and his glassware, I think I got the best end of the deal. "Davy Lang is probably dead," he said without preamble. "And I'm lucky I didn't go with him. I'm telling you this for the boy's sake, you understand. Don't go digging. You won't like what you find." He didn't look at me while he spoke. His whole attention was on the big mirror above the fireplace, and he didn't look shifty anymore. He looked plain terrified. "I don't plan to dig," I said. "The lad just paid me for a couple of hours' worth of looking. All I need is a story he'll believe." Of course, that wasn't totally true, but Nolan didn't need to know that. He laughed, though. "I don't believe it myself, and I was there for most of it," he said. "Give me a smoke, and I'll tell you a story." I passed him a Marlboro, let him light it himself, then sat in the armchair on the other side of the fireplace as he spoke softly, as if in fear of being overheard. "There are houses," he said, "special houses, where you can see dead people. Entry comes at a price." He rolled up his sleeve and showed me a recent tattoo of a white rose. I pulled back my own sleeve and showed him the black bird. "Tell me something I don't know." The fear jumped through him. "You're one of them! One of the Govan cultists!" I laughed. "Nah, I'm a Partick Thistle supporter, not a bear. This," I said, tapping my wrist, "got me into a house in Hindland to look for a lost lady." He tapped at his wrist. "This, and the ritual, was supposed to get me into the place in Govan to see my wife. Me and Lang were getting initiated at the same time. I wasn't happy. I'd read all those books, all that mumbo-jumbo, and guessed what was waiting for us. Lang was taking it seriously, though, and he was determined." "Back up a bit," I said. "How did you get into this in the first place?" "I met Lang at a psychic's place 3 months ago, got talking, and found we were both after similar things, a chance to see our wives again. We did the rounds together after that, until 6 weeks ago we got approached at a spiritualist seance that turned out to be a load of old bollocks. A chap came up to us afterwards and said he knew a place that actually worked if we were serious." He stopped and looked up at the mirror. "Did you see that?" he said, then looked quickly away and straight at me. "Look, I shouldn't be speaking about this. There's rules and consequences. That's what the chap said." "I take it this stuff you're on about is some kind of black magic, demonology, some of that special kind of shite?" He lowered his gaze and took a deep slug of whiskey. "Aye, and it was even worse than we expected." He gave a sharp glance at the mirror again, then kept a determined gaze on me for the rest of his explanation. "We spent weeks learning all their bloody chants and actions and such. It was like trying to join the Bloody Masons, and Lang said he expected it would be like an initiation, a wee scare at first, then we'd be inside, and maybe, just maybe, get to see our wives. So I got the tattoo, and 2 nights ago went along with Lang to the house in Govan. It's not much to look at, just a Victorian terrace at the end of a row. There were 12 of them in the front room, all dressed in black cloaks like something out of a fucking cheap horror movie. The chap we'd met before was their leader and introduced himself as the concierge. He said we were to be introduced to the master to see if we were worthy. They brought a knife and a poor starving dog in. Lang went first." He stopped to take another drink, and in the process took his gaze off me and looked up at the mirror again. Without warning, he threw the whiskey bottle. The mirror didn't break, but the bottle did, showering glass and cheap scotch across the fireplace, the hearth, and our feet. I thought that would be the end of it, but Nolan was still staring at the mirror. I turned to follow his gaze. My tattoo itched and throbbed again, but I didn't need the advice. There was nothing reflected in the mirror, none of Nolan's room, or of him or of me. The entire frame was filled with a mass of what looked like black, oily eggs, each of them glistening and emitting an aurora of shifting, dancing color that seeped out through the glass and over the mantle, where it poured down to the grate in a wave. I knew what I was looking at. I'd seen it before. It was a gateway, a portal to elsewhen. I was in no mood to go through it, but by the way the eggs were now pressing against the inside of the glass, forcing it to warp and bulge, I didn't think I was going to be offered a choice. Nolan had got off his chair and shuffled backwards on his arse across the floor, his gaze never leaving the black eggs. "Help me!" he wailed. I guessed he was talking to me, not the eggs, but I was too busy myself getting off the chair and backing away towards the door as a crack ran down the mirror from top to bottom. "Help me!" Nolan said again. "It's the bloody thing that got Lang! Now it wants me!" The crack became a split, and the eggs oozed out of the gap, slowly at first, then in a tumble and roil. Where they hit anything solid, they burst, a rainbow of color and a sheen of black tar that moved quickly to join with more of the same, until the waterfall that ran off the grate ran black, shining like a flow of thick oil. Nolan was still on the floor, having shuffled back to come up hard against a stack of newspapers and magazines. His stare was fixed on the black liquid, which was now pouring over the grate and creeping in thick tendrils towards the wee man's feet. I grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and hauled him up, like a recalcitrant puppy, throwing him behind me towards the main door. The pile of papers and magazines toppled forward into the path of the approaching black. It ate them. But it gave me an idea. I grabbed a newspaper from another pile, rolled it up, and fumbled for my Zippo. I had to step back quickly. The tarry fluid was now lapping at my feet. I flicked the lighter on, lit the paper, and once I was sure it was going to burn properly, threw it into the tar. Something screamed. Either the tar or the wee man behind me. I wasn't sure because by then I was heading for the door fast. The stuff didn't just look like tar. It burned like it too. And what with that and all the old papers in the room, the place went up like a firework. I caught up with Nolan in the street outside. Flames were already reaching up out of the second-floor window, red and orange, tinged with an oily rainbow aura. Black ash began to rain down on us. Nolan took one look at a smudge of it in his palm and made to run again. Once more, I grabbed his collar. "I need the address in Govan," I said. "No, you don't," Nolan replied. "But if you must, it's just off the Copeland Road, 35 Muir Inn Street. Just don't mention my name. I'm Offski. First train out, and I don't care where it takes me." He shucked himself out of his jacket and took off like a whippet, away before I even thought to chase him. I checked his pockets, found a pack of smokes, which I claimed as my reward for saving his life, then walked away as the insistent nee-naw of a fire engine echoed in the distance, too late to save the building, which was now well alight. I headed for a pub, any pub, to calm my jangling nerves. I mulled over what I'd just witnessed over a pint of heavy and a smoke in the courtyard at the back of Winter's Gills. I'd seen the black eggs before, and that had also been in junction with a mirror. As I mentioned earlier, it had been explained to me as a portal to other realms, possibly other dimensions of space and time. It even had a name, or rather, it had names, as it was something many cultures had sought and fought over. Sototh and Darbin were the two I remembered. What I hadn't known about until now was that the eggs could be directed against somebody, or that they could be popped. I guessed that had something to do with the house in Govan, but my tattoo throbbed every time I thought about that place, so I tried to skirt my musings around it. A second beer helped too, and a third, but I drew the line in the sand there. I might not like to think about the Govan place, but I knew I had to go there. Nolan said the black stuff had got Lang. If that was the case, there might not even be a body to find. But I had a client, and he deserved an answer, one way or the other. My tattoo was just going to have to get used to the idea. I made a detour back to my flat before heading to Govan for some of my own smokes, 2 shots of the good stuff from my desk drawer, and my first edition of The Little Sister. If the house was what I thought it was, I didn't want to be going in without my good luck charm, my totem. 35 Muir Inn Street was a run-down, 2-story Victorian end terrace property in a row of the same that had somehow survived the ravages of 60s tower block building in the area. I got there just before dusk and walked past it, stopping across the road to light a smoke and get a better look. Light showed in the downstairs bay window, and I saw somebody move around, but beyond that there was little to see. It was only as I approached the front door that I knew I was in the right place. The door, heavy oak, painted crimson, seemed to waver and shimmer, and there was a definite sense of pressure in the air as I stepped forward. My tattoo burned as if I'd been branded. I had no plan other than to get inside and see what was what, but as the pressure increased, I wondered if I was going to get that far. Then the door opened, and I wasn't fighting my way forward anymore. I stepped up so that the door couldn't be closed without my being able to at least get a foot in it, and studied the man who'd opened it. He was in his 50s, running to fat and balding, wearing a suit that cost more than I made last month, and smelling faintly of musk and something flowery. His eyes were the most striking thing about him, dark, almost black, and set back in deep sockets that gave him a cadaverous look. "Can I help you?" he said, as if there was nothing at all untoward about a door that shimmered and a house that tried to keep you out. I was looking for an answer when the house itself came to my aid. The singing came from a room in the upper floor, a deep man's voice. "He sleeps in the deep, in the seas far below. He sleeps with the fish in the dark." I finished along with him when the chorus came round. "The dreaming god is singing where he lies." I pulled up my sleeve and showed my tattoo. The cadaver raised an eyebrow. "I suppose you'd better come in then," he said. "I suppose I'd better," I replied, and followed him inside. He locked the door behind us as we went into the hallway beyond. The hallway was all dark green wallpaper and stained wood floor and ceiling, with more of the same when I was shown into the front room. There was little furniture beyond a single armchair by a fireplace, and shelves of books along the 3 walls. The bay window had gauze curtains blocking the city out, and it felt more like a room in a gentleman's club than a Govan house. That feeling only got stronger when the man spoke. "Brandy?" he said. "I never say no," I replied, and got a thin smile in reply. He went over to one of the bookshelves where there was a decanter and a few glasses. While his back was turned, I lifted up the corner of the large Persian rug underfoot, just enough to let me see the red paint of one point of what I supposed must be a pentagram on the wooden floor below. By the time he turned back, I was upright and looking innocent. The brandy was too sweet for my tastes, but went down smooth enough. The man appeared to be calm and composed, and not in the slightest put out by my arrival. I decided to try to shake him up a bit. "You are the concierge?" I asked. He nodded. I showed him my tattoo again, and also the book I had in my pocket. "I have my sigil and my totem. Do you have a spare room?" I was running on instinct, but I saw something flicker in his eyes and knew I was on the right track. "I've been to the house in Hindland before, but I was in this area and felt the call, as it were." "We are not like other houses," he said, and now he wasn't quite as calm as before. "Don't tell me. You're Baptists?" I said, and laughed. He didn't join me. "This is a serious business," he said. I gave him the biggest push I could manage and hoped it was enough. "Nolan was right. He told me you had a pole up your arse." He laughed at that, though. "Ah, so you were the one with him today. We found him at Central Station. We've been looking for you, and here you are, offering yourself up." I realized, far too late, that I wasn't the one in charge. I tossed what was left of my brandy, including the glass, in his face and threw a haymaker towards his jaw. But he was faster, better trained, and just leaned back and hit me, hard, with a left jab to the jaw. I was still recovering from that when the doorway filled with men in black capes, shepherding the wee man Nolan in front of them like a whipped dog. Two big lugs grabbed my arms, the concierge swept the rug away from the pentacle, and the night's festivities proper got underway. I'd been right about the pentacle. It was laid out in inch-thick red paint across the floorboards, the five-pointed star enclosed by two outer circles containing Hebrew script. "You do know that what you're dealing with here has fuck all to do with any Judaic religions, right?" I said. "Yon gatekeeper is far, far older than any of our desert gods. I don't know how these houses work, but I think they've always been here in some form, and I know this one is broken. The gateway should be on the other side, not wandering this one." Nobody paid me any attention. The concierge left and returned draped in one of the black robes. It was only then that he spoke to me. "Our dark master takes no heed of your lies. He has shown himself to us, and today, in finding the two of you, he has spread his power farther than ever. Soon he will show himself abroad in the city." "Tonight, Govan. Tomorrow, the world," I said and laughed. "You Baptists don't do things by halves, do you?" "Mock as much as you like," the concierge said. "But he does our bidding now, and after the sacrifices, we shall have our rewards from the Prince of Hell." Nolan was thrust into the center of the pentagram, where he stood shivering, although the room was getting warmer more than anything. He didn't move while the cultists, 12 of them, I noted, started to chant, something in Latin I didn't understand. I got it now. These fucking idiots had found the house, noted there was a power in it, and thought it was possessed. Now they were in the process of opening the gateway and letting out an occult force that was, probably for a damn fine reason, locked in the building. And all because some deranged satanic ritual was actually working, actually doing the unlocking. Knowing didn't help me much. I struggled to get out of the two men's grip, but they were too strong, and I could only watch as a tear formed high up in the space above Nolan's head, a rip in reality, behind which black, sleek, shiny eggs seethed and roiled in a rainbow aurora. The tear grew wider. The dancing rainbow aurora cascaded out and washed over the inner center of the pentacle, swirling and seething around poor, terrified Nolan. The 12 robed figures kept up the Latin chant and now stomped their feet in time. Upstairs, the bass voice started up with the Dreaming God song again, but the cowled figures chanted louder, stomped harder. Whoever was up there was fighting against the cult, not with them. Nolan looked up nervously, like a rabbit caught in headlights, as the first egg started to ooze out of the crack in space. As soon as the crack widened, there would be a cascade of the black tar to match what we'd seen above his fireplace earlier. The bass voice upstairs sang, almost shouted now, as the egg dripped out of the crack, and didn't fall, merely hung in the air 6 inches below the ceiling. I was watching the concierge and saw puzzlement cross his face. This wasn't his doing. I played a hunch and joined in with the man upstairs, adding my voice to the song. He sleeps in the deep, in the seas far below. He sleeps with the fish in the dark. A second egg fell out of the crack and hung beside the first, throbbing in time, not with the Latin chant or the stomping, but with the song of the dreaming god. He dreams as he sleeps, in the deep, in the cold, and the dreaming god is singing where he lies. A third and a fourth egg dripped to join the other two, all 4 beating like tiny black hearts in time with a song. One of the men holding me tugged at my arm and aimed a punch, hoping to stop me from singing, but he hadn't had the concierge's training, and I slid quickly inside his swinging arm, headbutted him hard across the bridge of the nose, and was suddenly free. I played another hunch and stepped inside the pentacle to stand next to Nolan. None of the cultists moved to join us, all of them now stomping and shouting in frenzy. I saw a flicker of fear in the concierge's eyes for the first time. This wasn't going to his plan. "Sing, wee man," I said to Nolan. "Your life depends on it." I sang through another verse and chorus with the voice upstairs. Nolan still hadn't joined in. There were now 12 eggs hanging and throbbing above us, and I couldn't be sure, but I thought they might be slowly dropping lower. "Sing, Nolan! Your missus is in this house somewhere. If you won't sing for me, sing for her." He finally looked up, tears in his eyes, and joined in as we launched into another verse with the guy upstairs. He sleeps in the deep, in the seas far below. Nolan surprised me with a high, clear tenor that cut through everything, in counterpoint to the bass line, adding depth to it such that the whole room rang and echoed, not with the Latin or the stamping, but with the power of our song. He sleeps with the fish in the dark. The crack widened. Shiny black eggs, scores, hundreds of them, fell through and hung in a beating sheet of blackness over our heads, over the pentacle, spreading to cover the whole room. One of the cultists had seen enough and tried to make for the door, but the concierge stopped him, pulled him back, and holding on tightly, he exhorted his cult to louder, more frenzied chanting and stamping. "Our master is here! All praise to his glory! He dreams as he sleeps, in the deep, in the cold." The concierge raised his head, eyes filled with rapture, and opened his mouth to chant. An egg fell from the sheet above, landed between his lips, and popped. A rainbow shimmer showed in front of his face. Black tar coated his teeth and tongue, and he had time for only one last gurgle before he fell to the floor just outside the edge of the pentacle. The other cultists broke ranks. Their chant failed, their stomping stopped, and the eggs rained down, breaking on them before they were able to take more than a step. As we brought our song to a close, the cultists were already falling still. The tar ate them, sinew and fat, bone and muscle, blood and brains, until there was nothing left but an oily mess on the floor. Soon, even that dissipated, as the tar evaporated quickly into a radiant, shimmering aurora of color that was sucked as if by a vacuum cleaner, backwards and upward, through the tear in space and away. There wasn't even a scrap of a black robe left. They found their hell, after all. And the dreaming god is singing where he lies. The last note faded, the tear in space closed, and Nolan and I looked around an empty room. Even the pentangle had gone, cleansed by the same magic that had taken the cult. The singing from upstairs wasn't quite over, but now it was a woman's voice, soft and high. "He sleeps in the deep, in the seas far below." I watched Nolan. He recognized it clearly enough. "Jean?" he whispered. I lit 2 smokes and passed one to him. "So, what do you say, wee man? She's up there waiting to see you. You need a new house, and this one needs a new concierge, one who isn't a raving nutter. Are you up for it?" He looked bemused. "What do I do?" "You'd be the gatekeeper, making sure the gateway, that black shit, the Sototh, stays on the far side where it's supposed to, and helping anybody that comes asking to have a wee look through without all yon satanic crap buggering things up. But mostly I think it's a kind of learn-as-you-go job if I understand it properly," I replied. "Your Jean might help, and I'll send you a visitor. You can see how it goes from there." "A visitor?" "Aye, a client. You'll ken him. A lad who's recently lost his father. Be kind to him, or I'll be round to sort you out." My tattoo burned, but warmly, gently, as I left Nolan in the doorway and went to tell my client that he'd got his money's worth.
Well, that took a turn for the Lovecraftian, didn't it? Do you ever get the creeping feeling that an unfathomable and hungry entity is pushing against the thin veil of our world, waiting for the smallest tear to burst through and consume humanity? No, me neither. If you enjoyed this story, please check out the author's other work in the links below, including a link to his chapbook collection, which has a variety of incredible stories written over the span of 30 years. Don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button. And remember, don't fall asleep.